Independence. People think of Independence Day and 4th of July and these kinds of events. We think immediately 4th of July. And some of us just figure, it's probably not going to have to go to work tomorrow. That's the real mundane. Some of us remember to give thanks for a shift in the world and a freedom this country found and all that. I think that's cool too. But I always look at things, I tend to look at things from a broad perspective. So I realized immediately, there's two kinds of freedom and independence: internal and external. What we don't usually realize is internal freedom and independence can manifest external freedom and independence. Not as likely for external to create internal freedom and independence. People say, I'm working so that I can retire and have my financial freedom or my independence. Usually they die a few days later. So they didn't really get to the benefits of what they thought they wanted. We have to learn to find freedom and independence internally now. It has to be something we choose, and it is a choice, but we choose to bring it into our soul now. Then whether you retire or you don't retire, we should still feel freedom. People do that. They tend to build things up for that eventuality, and then, it all too often fails. I can't wait until one day I'm married, then I'll get to have all these wonderful, and it's still life. Can't wait till I get a divorce, and it's still life. If you date more creeps, after the divorce, you still are potentially that's a testimonial right there, you see. If you keep doing the same thing you've been doing, then where's the freedom and where's the independence? Benjamin Franklin said, disobedience to tyrants is obedience to God. He wanted that to be our nation's motto. The others are like, dude, that's a bit intense. We don't want to upset people more than we have to. But think about that statement. Think about that statement in relation to your own voices of doubt and ego. Disobedience to tyrants, meaning saying no to my ego, is automatically saying yes to God. Because God isn't something we have to actually earn. It's there. It's a consciousness that's here. But we can't see it because we're enslaved by the voice of the ego, which isn't really a great voice to be enslaved by. No enslavement's good, but the ego has no intention of any good for us. So we've got the idea of internal and external independence or freedom. The internal freedom is the foremost, but the external one is the one people focus on the most, thinking it's going to get them something. And in a sense, both of those are shackled by the ego, whether it's internal, external, independent. It can be held back by ego, internally or externally. But even when we think, I'm going to shoot for some forms of external independence, how do we actually achieve it? Even external, how do we achieve it? If you think by working to get there gets you there, technically you're still enslaved. There's a Zen kind of a way, and it's called acceptance. But to accept our freedom and independence, meaning our true identity, it comes from love and forgiveness, believe it or not. Love and forgiveness. It sounds strange because people think of love and forgiveness as having just one dimension to it. It's multidimensional. Love and forgiveness is what shifts us from singular thinking to multidimensionality. Love and forgiveness has the greatest power of anything on this planet. Whatever you want to know, you want to just have a little greater income, love and forgiveness can provide it. But you want oneness with God, only love and forgiveness can provide that. So that says a lot for the concept of love and forgiveness. So we have these struggles. I'm going to read a quote I brought. But we have to understand that one of the greatest effects of peace and freedom is that we start to find our free will. And as you exercise proper free will, you start to get more peace and freedom. So we have to understand that free will is a part of this entire conversation. Independence, freedom, how do we get it? We have to fight for it. You have to speak up. You have to picket. You have to petition. That's not God saying that. Even though it sounds like it'll pay off because we're going to get some independence by fighting for it. And sometimes that seems to be what we have to do. But if you fight for it and you forget to pray for it, it's going to be a hollow victory. If you have to seemingly fight for freedom and independence, like a divorce or a breakup of a business where people are all messing with each other. Once upon a time, the Beatles broke up, but they were part of a band. And so when 3 of them decided to invest with one particular new manager that was going to be their financial man, he was ripping them off. One of the 4, McCartney, said, this guy cannot be trusted and he's stealing from us. The other said, no, let's just do it. So that means he was now losing money because he's part of a unit. He had to sue his best friends and bandmates to get himself out of the Beatles so he wouldn't lose money. And he ended up the wealthiest of them. Did he have to do? He actually had to do that to prevent harm. So sometimes you have to step up. But when we do, we can still do so with guidance. God, I know of no other way. Help me and guide me, especially my heart and soul. Guide me in this. That's why the forefathers of our country, to a degree, they were saying, we would rather not have to do this. They didn't say, this is a great opportunity to have a war. They were like, we would rather not. Do you know the pain that Abraham Lincoln was in during the Civil War? The man was constantly in turmoil because it seems like that's what we had to do. So he was just trying to do it with as much center as possible. So sometimes the actions seem like they need to be there, but that's only because human beings haven't realized yet the full power of the mind. In our minds alone, we could have resolved those wars in a day, but people haven't completely realized that. So the ego will twist, even, this concept of free will, because you have to exercise free will to find independence. I have but one life to give for my country, right? That's my greatest regret. That's the voice of someone saying, I believe in something great here. I believe in something fantastic. There's a spirit guiding this, but it's not because one country's good and one's bad. It's because one is still trying to enslave. The wars were greatly about enslavement. The reason we were able to get people finally involved in World War II was more and more hearing about the enslavement that was going on. The Civil War. Of course, the wars are about money too. Money and power, But greatly, especially the psychological support of war, came from seeing too much enslavement. And in the First World War, it's not a dissing of any other country, Germany, England, or anybody else on this planet. But it's a time for us to come out. And America, we're saying, well, we're going to try this new thing, and we're going to have a new level of freedom. The ego doesn't go, oh, well, then I'll just stay out of America and live elsewhere. The ego rides along with every movement we take, every action we take, every place we move to. The ego's still there because we're there. It's in our minds. So it's there to sabotage. So the ego is going to say, I would rather you not exercise free will because that's your spiritual identity. And if you discover your spiritual identity, 1 second later, the ego will cease to exist. So the ego doesn't want us to know free will because we then choose goodbye to the enslavement and yes, hello to freedom. But when you say, okay, I'm going to exercise free will, the ego will twist even the meaning of free will. The ego makes us think that our free will is actually more like individuality, like separation from one another. It means my free will means I have my own opinions, which are coming from the ego, by the way, but I'm going to fight for them. So the ego will even twist what free will means. And then it will teach us what an unhealthy free will looks like. So here's a quote I want to share. This is from a song, and I think it's a hilarious song. And it's called I Want to Be the Boss. It's by the band 10cc. But there's this one part where this tyrant that's singing the song that wants to rule the world. It's I want to rule the world. That's what it is. And the tyrant breaks in this one part of the song. Everyone's going to be free, but they have to agree to be free. They have to agree to be less free than me because I rule the world, you see. And that's the ego. The ego will even play along to make it look like we're fighting for something righteous when in fact it has its own agenda there the whole time. It'll even make us look like we're, like I said, fighting for something righteous. It's right that I have my own voice. That's true. But what voice are you going to share? The one that's right to have, or the one that's still fear-based? So when we look at history, I think it's tragic that once upon a time, there was a sect of people, the new Christians, of a new religion being born. And the Christians, by the Romans, were being killed. They were being killed, not just oppressed a little, killed, but oppressed and enslaved and all this, mainly because they had this belief in healing that the Romans couldn't understand, and spiritual beliefs. Spiritual beliefs and healing was the reason they were persecuted. Feel very terrible about that. But what's weird about it is, soon enough, finally, the Christians became strong enough in their voice to say, independence from the Romans, and they got it. And then they started killing people for healing beliefs and spiritual beliefs. You see what I'm saying? And well, we're going to get away from that, though, because that was just some people messing that concept up. Let's get away from them. Let's go start our own country. It was only a few years later we started burning people at the stake for healing and their spiritual beliefs. You see what I'm saying? We fight for something, and then the ego will take it over anyway and twist it anyway. So that's why the external concept of freedom and independence is dangerous without the internal. If we have internal peace, which comes from freedom, and freedom comes from peace. If we have an internal state of peace, which comes from oneness with God, then we start a new country, we start a new rock group, we write a song, and the ego can't as much infiltrate because it's not an external thing. When you try to get external peace, it's never lasting because nothing on the outside is forever. So we have to find it inside. It's almost like saying, rather than having a coaching kind of a person to follow, a mentor that says, fight for it, tell them what you think, we're advocates, get the signs, tell everybody, pick it outside your family's house, you never loved me, you'll never love me enough. Those people, that's great because they might be well-intended, although usually not. But if I could have that versus somebody like Viktor Frankl, an Auschwitz survivor, saying, oh, you know what? Things don't always go well on the outside. I was in Auschwitz. Your mother doesn't like you. Which do you think was the heavier burden to carry? If I can survive Auschwitz, I think you can handle a family member that's annoying. But he's going to say, I didn't win by picketing. I gave up on those people and found it within myself, right? Just like Mandela and others. People can do it. They've trained themselves. They learned to have such strength inside. They turn their mind and focus it inside and choose to find the peace that we thought the external was going to give us. One of the external, I brought it up earlier, but one of the external things we seek is the retirement. But nowadays, when you go to claim it, it's not even there anymore. So how's that working out? How's that freedom? How's that independence? We have to realize, you know what? God and I can create things that this world cannot provide. Kind of a bummer. I would like to have thought I could count on certain things, but it's just not so. So I better try to find it inside. Now, the inside doesn't mean like, well, I was hoping for a great life, but I guess I'll just find God instead, as though they're mutually exclusive. Because that's what we do. Well, prosperity's not working out. I guess I'll be a monk and be broke, You've probably already done that in other lifetimes anyway, so that's redundant. Instead, what we can do is find inner peace. The inner peace can create the external freedom. Because getting in the consciousness of God, actually we can create a new life of more abundance by being in the zone. People do not understand this anywhere near as much as they should. We can have an external, blissful, prosperous life by being in the zone. The guidance can tell you which investments to make, or which projects to invest in, or whatever it happens to be, project-wise. The Spirit of God speaks to us. It can tell us which things we're doing. Where do you think great inventors came from? They're minds that sat still and said, there must be another way to do this. There's a way to do this with less effort. And a lot of people who are broke love to resent those who have funds. But just use your spiritual ingenuity and it still can guide you into having the same freedom financially, but a better freedom, most likely spiritually. So remember that there's This concept of independence we have to look at, because there's a paradox here. Independence, if it's me, I'm so glad to be independent, unlike you. If I turn my back on you and say that I'm independent, that's an ego-based independence. If your independence means you're autonomous, thank God, because everybody else is messed up but you, then you are not actually independent. External concepts of independence are mostly a lie. Trying to get away from others so you can be independent. Can't wait to be independent from my family. I mean, my family was messed up in a lot of ways. And when I was 17, it's not legal to be autonomous. So I had to get papers filed to break free of my family. I forget the legal name for it, but it's some form of an independence. And it felt kind of cool, except they wouldn't sign the papers. And that's kind of weird. We're going to need your family, who is a problem, to sign these papers, you know? So I had to forge them. Well, you do what you got to do, man. I hope those records are not available for somebody to come and talk to me about that, but no. Right? Yeah, thank God nobody else knows about it but you. Never mind. But I had to get that autonomy so that I could move on with my life, right? If I do that with hatred, then I'm not free anyway. You have to do it with a sense of, kind of like saying to the heavens and to yourself, I wish I didn't have to do it through divorce papers. I wish I didn't have to do it by saying no to my child, or whatever it is. I'd rather it not be that way and taken so strong, but it is. Okay? So let me be coming from as much a place of love as possible and take my actions. Ask to stay in the center with God while you take your actions. That's the key right there. Not do I do the action or not do the action. It's how to do the action with the center in God. That's the secret right there. Well, I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to say something about that. But there's this false independence that we think is healthy, and then we think dependence is bad. Well, it is. Codependence is unhealthy. But there's a paradox here. Healthy independence is actually healthy inner dependence. And healthy in or inner dependence means we are healthily aware of our dependence on God. That's a statement of humility. So I actually become independent in the greatest interpretation of the word when I recognize my spiritual dependence on God. See? When I make my greatest claims of independence, I'm most likely not independent at all, because it's usually coming from a charge, a reaction. Is that making sense? Mm-hmm. So there's much to think about here, but there's many layers to what I just that last couple of sentences to really meditate on. I want independence and I'm taking actions for that, but I forgot it starts with my center in God and my dependence on God. Some people wouldn't even like that term, dependence on God, because we are the child of God, because God is our source. But it also means not just, well, we're kind of worthless, so we're completely dependent upon God. It means when I recognize my position as the created rather than the creator, in my humility, I'm tapping into the all. I'm given all that I need. In other words, I'm made great in God by accepting my dependence in God. The ego will tell you, that whole dependent thing, you and God, you could be individuating away from God and become a God unto yourself. And that is when the fall took place. When we said, well, maybe we of ourselves are all kind of wonderfulness. And we forgot, I am myself, I'm nothing. Because there is no individual self in God. We are all one. So recognizing our dependence on God means our dependence on the fact that we're one. Look at the paradox. See, independence is a false way of making you think you're something special because you're separate. Separation is what causes every form of pain and suffering on this planet. So we've got to clear our minds. Even hearing that, you can say to yourself, even if you don't totally get what I said, you can say, but there's something about what I just heard that makes sense. It is not independence of my ego that I'm looking for, and I'm clear about that now. What I want only is the spiritual independence that I am, that comes from oneness with God. And you are never finding peace, freedom, independence without love. So we have to exercise free will, which we did as a nation, for example, here and there. We have to exercise free will. But you are not having free will if it isn't a loving will. If you're not being loving when you exercise your will, you're not free at all. You're captive of your ego and resentments and charges and patterns. Is that making sense? Free will means completely free. True free will is a loving will. There's no exceptions. True free will it's centered in love. So, and freedom, the freedom I'm seeking is not a cause. Freedom is an effect. I have to have connectedness with God, oneness with peace, for me to actually feel free, for me to have independence. All right? So these things, they're not as much a cause as we think. They're effects. So if you say, well, I would love to be, free and have financially free and whatever, why? Because then I can do this and this and this. You're thinking freedom is a cause that can make things happen in your life. And I'm saying peace is the cause that brings you freedom, that then allows you to do some things, whatever those things might be. So what brings us to this? So realize this now. What if you say, well, I don't have a big problem with freedom. I'm financially free, or I live, on my own. I can choose to date who I want and so on. That's all great news. But do you realize that even a tense muscle is a conflict in your body? A tense thought. For example, you go to the grocery store today. As simple as this could seem. Do I want this to drink or this to drink? You already are in conflict because you think there's two things to choose between. This is going to get weird for just a minute, so bear with me. As soon as human beings think they have two things to choose between, they're in conflict because the world teaches you duality. Should I get married? Should I not get married? Should I get a divorce? Should I not get a divorce? Should I date this person or that person? Every thought. Should I comb my hair this way or that way? Should I get a haircut? I don't know. All of those, believe it or not, are signs of a lack of peace. They're symptoms. They might seem totally, minor and irrelevant. They're all symptomatic because divided we fall. Do you ever hear of a splitting headache? Splitting headaches come from having such division in our mind where our mind is split that it's now manifesting as pain. Or the concept of divided we fall. That's the same idea. We are constantly dismantled by the ego so that we don't have a unified system of mind, body, and soul. Health issues, psychological issues. These are splits within us. People can be dissociated from their body. That's a split. People commit suicide. It's a form of splitting. I understand it. I totally get it. But what happens is the poor souls have said, I cannot fight this anymore. There's something in them that overwhelmed them. And they said, I don't have it in me to fight this anymore. And sadly, there's not enough people around them that understand what's going on and can explain it. Instead, well, let's not talk about that. You're depressed and that's kind of a bummer to talk about or whatever. And they're not getting that support. But the splitting headaches, the tense muscles, what is inflammation is a seeming cause to most illnesses. Inflammations, whether it's growths, tumors, whatever, those are inflammations. That means something inside me was fighting. Do you actually think that you and your body are separate? Because you talk holism all the time. Oh, I love holistic mind, body, and soul. Then do you not know that your mind is playing a part in the inflammation in your body? Oh no, that's my body's issue. Well, you own your body. It's a reflection of your mind. I'm not dissing because we all have them. But they're coming from conflict. You could say I have a vertebra out of place. That's because one vertebra wants to go this way and one wants to go that way. Why is that? Because the owner has a conflict inside. See? Peace, 4th of July, freedom, and I'm talking about vertebra, right? How does that make any sense? It makes total sense. We have conflicts inside, guys, and they have to be resolved. And they're not minor issues. Every conflict is reflecting a thought conflict. The ultimate conflict is there's a this and a that. There's God and there's us. We forgot our oneness. See, so human beings will think there's two things to choose between or think about. And God's saying, I am that I am. Yeah, but exactly what are you? I am that I am. Well, what can we call you then? I am. What color are you? I am. How tall are you? I am. What gender are you? I am. God's trying to tell us, stop trying to come up with anything else but God is. And you're part of God is, so we are. But God is. Yeah, but what is God? I just told you. God is. We're going, that's an incomplete sentence. Fill it in. We want more because we want to split it off. God is, I am, and we are. Period. It's all the same. So in this universe, our minds are constantly warring between now, once we decide there's something other than God is, now there's God is, and we are not one with God. Now there's a heaven, and then there's an earth, or heaven and hell. Then there's a God and the devil. Then there's this and that. Angels and demons. You know? People we love, people we don't love. People we like, people we don't like. Everything just keeps splitting off. And what I'm saying is all of our splitting, which is the opposite of loving and forgiving, results in splitting, and all the splitting that looks like it's happening in an external world. Certain races of people enslaving other races. There are not two of anything. They're both messed up on some level in consciousness and need healed. One is oppressing another person in my neighborhood. There's not two. There's one, but we can't see it right now because they're living the duality, the split. What is our job? God, show me how to see those two warring people in my neighborhood as one. Show me how to see this and that as the same. Show me how to see things through your eyes rather than my two eyes that keep seeing two things, two or more things, splitting off. The opposite is two or more gathered as one is the solution and the healing. That doesn't just mean literally you have to have two people in the same room praying. That's what we often interpret it to be. No. It's two or more gathered with one intention. Christ said, there shall I be. What he's saying is, you think there's two or more going the opposite direction. I'm saying gather two or more into oneness, and you're healing the separation. Now you'll see miracles because you're reversing the whole process of the symptoms of separating. So, in our lives, it comes down to this. You're always having to make a decision between whatever, this and that. It seems rational. I was thinking about moving, but I'm not sure if I should move here or there, or moving or not moving. Decision making. Gosh, so many decisions and so little time, but so many decisions. It's without you knowing it, it's causing you to feel split, and it even can cause a splitting headache. So what do? Course in Miracles will explain it like this. It says something to the effect, you really struggle and you live in fear, and one reason is because you forgot that there's only one. One God, oneness, and one answer to every question you have. Well, no, but you don't understand. Do I move or don't I? There's only one answer. There has to be two. Should I move or not? You know, like which place is better if I'm choosing between two places? Or do I get divorced or not? So he explains, he says, look carefully at what you're asking when you ask yourself questions. Because underneath what you think are harmless questions is this. You come up with an answer, like you can say money and prosperity as a topic. It's a charged subject. So some of us go, well, I need to create more prosperity. But there's another voice inside that says, there's people that don't like you if you're too prosperous. Which means as soon as you start making more money, there's another part of you that's afraid to make money so you don't get dissed by people. You see what I'm saying? This happens all the time without us realizing it. Because we're conflicted. So in my mind, we'll do this. Okay, should I get divorced or not? We have a challenging situation with one another. What does God want me to do? God steps back, nothing to do with this. You're not asking for the one answer. You're asking which answer. There isn't more than one answer. And we get into a bit of a struggle about this. It's really hard to understand this, but this is the route to developing peace and freedom and independence. Find one answer to questions. Now, what if, I get this divorce? So Jesus explains in the Course, he's saying, if you try to do everything right, let's say, for example, I got to do everything right. I want to get a divorce, but for the kids and for this and that and the other, and I don't want to upset my ex, and then his parents will get upset, and you never know. And one of the parents is older; they could get sick because I'm getting a divorce. So you conflicted yourself. So you're trying to behave for everybody's sake, but your mind is conflicted because it wish it weren't having to do that. You're split. Or you can say, fine, then I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and leave. But there's another part going, oh, should you really be doing that to everybody? In other words, the ego will not allow you to be happy without doubting yourself no matter what decision you make. And God says, when you're ready, go ahead and ask me for one answer. And the one answer is going to be, what answer does the most good for the most people? This is a human interpretation of that questioning, answering. What is the greatest good? And then get your mind to say this. Once you decide, the greater good will be this divorce. The greater good will be for me to move or take this job. Don't let your mind go, but. If you're going to do that, then you haven't yet made up your mind, so stop until you're ready. But once you're ready, onwards, let's go. Don't let your mind go, yeah, but. If you still have that, then don't call it a decision and sit there and be conflicted for a little longer. But once you make a decision, be clear. This is the right thing. This is the most loving thing I can see happening here. This is me doing my best to be guided towards the one answer. And here's why some people don't like that. Humans are so weak that they have this tendency to be split and judgmental, and then they learn to go, I don't judge anymore because I'm spiritual. So you say, well, but I'm having this fight with this person and I don't know how. Well, you're both right and you're both wrong. There's two sides. Even if one is beating the other up, well, I don't want to get involved because there's, everybody has a say-so in this. Until it's convenient for them to say, oh, I don't like that one. So humans will enable behaviors. And I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a second. There is something called God. There's the truth of God. There's the oneness of God. There's the love of God. Find that. And then it's the right thing. You don't have to just, choose. There's nations that didn't support other nations in wars because, well, it's not really our fight. It is. We're all connected. And when you don't step up, you're enabling the opposite, so you still made a decision. So make the most right decision you can make. I've shared the story many times and I'm coming to a close. But I've shared the story many times. But our forefathers got together in a room to sign the Declaration of Independence. I'm not giving a history lesson. I'm saying this is something we need to learn from. They got together, they went in this room, and they said, should we or should we not sign this paper? If we don't, we're oppressed. If we do, we're going to be hunted down for treason. Gee, which one should we do? And they were conflicted. And they say, it's actually recorded in history books about this, but they don't have an answer to what happened. But the historians don't have an answer. But they say that forefathers of our country are sitting in that room deciding, should we or shouldn't we? See, that's two. Should we, shouldn't we? And then a voice, they said, rang out from a stranger in the balcony. When doors are all locked, nobody knows how they get in. But a voice rings out from the balcony and says, you will sign those papers. Even if there's a rope around your neck, an hour later, you will sign those papers because this is about righteousness and freedom and God and love and boom, boom, boom. These people, these are forefathers of a country. These are courageous people that we have birthdays for now. And they're all gathered around and they're children being told what's right. You see what I'm saying? You will sign those papers. And the history annals say, as soon as the voice stopped, the forefathers ran to the paper to sign. Excited. Something in them, greater than the human self, spoke. Not just the voice up there, but inside themselves. Like, I'm not even going to think twice about this. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. Do what's right. well, yeah, but everybody's wrong. What exactly? And that's just enabling. Those are human beings that are so weak, they went from originally being judgmental to saying, I don't judge anymore, and now what they're doing is nothing. There's judging, there's not judging, and then there's judging righteously, which is the third step that almost nobody has achieved yet. The non-judging is a lie. That's weak people justifying something by taking no action. Step up. What is right? And if you see a schoolyard, you're a school teacher and some kid's beating up another, you go over and you stop it because it's right. It's right to speak up for people being harmed, saying, hey, this isn't okay. Don't hate the other person, but say this isn't okay. Do what's right. Follow what you know to be the presence of love to the best of your ability. And you just say, this is the best of my ability. I don't know if I've got this down perfectly. I'm just doing to the best of my ability. How do I know it's the best? Because I'm going to keep praying for guidance on the best. That helps. Also looking for simple cues like what's the greatest good. But in my closing, I want to add that our inner conflicts are a challenge. Like I myself, I could just go, well, I'm an author, I'm a spiritual teacher. So, because a lot of my colleagues and friends, they're authors, and they make a living off being authors, and they put aside money for kids to go to college, and that's kind of what they do. It's just a routine. And I'm like, there's more to this than just that. There's more to this than just writing books and retiring. Am I living this? Instead of just writing about it, selling books, sending kids to college. I'm like, kids, you ain't going to college. There's something more to this. That's their thing. But if they want to go, that's fine. That's their thing, if they got the money. So for me, it's like, there's more to this. How do we live this? Now, on earth, because I think some of you can relate to this, but I'm just fessing up as a speaker, teacher, and all that. For me, it's like, well, I'm a human being, but no, I'm a spiritual being as well. So that's a conflict. And so I'm trying to live one of the challenging conflicts and bring it to resolution by bringing closure, bringing healing too. I'm a spiritual being, but a human being as well. Right? So I've got people that say, well, spiritual being, Michael, what you ought to do is you got to let yourself be human too. So, here, have a drink or have a smoke or because they're trying to convince me that that's what's being human. And in my life, I was just too odd to be able to even do that and just be okay with it. I'm like, really? The few times I tried it, to try things out, whether it's a drink or to be intimate when I don't want to be intimate. I've done that a couple of times in my life and only felt bad about it. Now, that's conflict bringing more conflict. But the outer conflict is just reflecting the inner conflict around this in the first place. How do I reconcile spirituality and materiality? It's not an easy order. Let's start somewhere small, like which station to turn on today. I'm going for spiritual and material, trying to reconcile that. And that's been probably my biggest experience and lesson in this life is that particular, because it's a conflict. But one, we all have our conflicts, and it's one that I need to reconcile. One way we reconcile it is balance. How do I balance? Not choose between two things, but how do I bring them to one? To be spiritual and yet material. Bring the spiritual into the material. You see what I'm saying? How do I spiritualize gardening if I were a gardener? How do I spiritualize bookkeeping if that's what I need to do? We think they're separate, so we have spiritual people that are broke because they want to be spiritual and they don't know how to be material. You get what I'm saying? But I've seen on our websites too and Facebook pages and all these things, if we talk about prosperity, which we don't push that often here, but if we talk about prosperity, there's always some nutbag that gets on the internet and says, oh, all you spiritual groups are always talking about money. You see? So then we go, oh, we shouldn't talk about money. And now we bought into poverty consciousness holding us captive. So what do? There's always somebody, in the ego that's going to attack and do these things. Find your own sense of freedom. And it's not going to mean that people all of a sudden get you, but you find your freedom in your family. You find your freedom in your relationships. You find your freedom in any and all things. But I'm just letting you know that to be up here and do this, my God, I can't just passively just wander through life waiting to retire. For me, human sexuality is a big charged issue with abuse and all these other issues and addiction. That's a big charged issue. I write a book about it. And then it becomes, is that what he's about? No. If I'm not about that, you have people that are into that saying, I'm a hypocrite because I'm not into it enough like they are. But if I am into it, you have people over here saying, you're way too involved with sexuality and writing about sexuality. You must be a pervert. Those are, the religious people. So you get these two sides, and I'm like, wow. The world loves no-win situations so that you collapse and are bound in no freedom. So I've just tried to reconcile these things and say, no, what I'm trying to teach is spiritual, and yet you're a human being. But do things spiritually, whether it's cooking or whether it's lovemaking. Do what you do from a spiritual state of mind. You see? So the conflicts we share collectively beat us up when we try to break free of them. But you still have to do it. It's our destiny. I'm sorry if it's a challenge, but it's our destiny to be that voice that says, you know what, no more of this. Somebody's got to say something different. And then you live it. And I lived that. I lived that conflict. I lived going to spiritual centers to teach, and then, them saying, he wrote a book on sexuality. Let's not have him back because of that. Because they assume if I write a book about it, that's what I'm all about. I'm about healing it, but they don't understand healing it, so they're not going to get it. So it's going to be, this is in the sutras, in the tantras, writings, and even in scripture, that people that are pure of heart will see everything purely, and people that are toxic are going to see everything as toxic. People see through their own lenses, in other words. You have to find your center and be true to it. If you're going to say, yeah, but it's going to be a conflict, and now it will show up for you somewhere. Somebody's voice or somebody's behavior. So you can choose to do nothing or choose, but you consciously or unconsciously, you're going to have your battles to fight in life. I don't mean they all have to be aggressive battles. That's a term some people don't like. But you're going to have it. And if in your family you're into holistic, but your family's all into traditional allopathic medicine, you're going to notice a conflict. Love, communication will be one way you can bring those two seeming separate groups into the same place. Respecting their viewpoints, for example, instead of conflicting. But you don't give up your own viewpoints. Is that all making sense? So peace and freedom. How do we find that peace and freedom? One way, internal love and forgiveness. Another way, find balance between two seemingly separate things. Even if you're reconciling an argument between two people, find the bridge that brings their consciousness together, their opinions together. Do what you can to be a bridge. And I wish I could say to you, when you do that, everything goes peacefully around your life. But it doesn't work that way sometimes. Martin Luther King was still killed for standing up for what was right. Kennedy's or whomever else you want to use as a metaphor. It doesn't always go our way. And I find that to be a major bummer, personally. I could say, it's all okay, children of light. No, I could honestly say sometimes I find that to be a real bummer because I do what I can, but what we see happen in my life, what I see is also a mirror of my attempt to take for humanity topics and bring them to peace. And I learned, the hard way a lot of times that's not what they want. Like, well, I thought that, no? Oh, okay. I just assumed, no, okay. Not ready. So are you going to wait till they're ready, or do you plant seeds in the meantime? Yeah. And man, for me, it was all just so bizarre to say, okay, I'm gonna do my best to hold this center. I teach this, but yet I'm also very lean in my actions about things. I don't get wasted and all that. But I've made jokes about getting high and that sort of thing. But it's not something I choose to do. And yet there's people that assume such. There's people that have gone online and said, what's with the long hair, dude? Why don't you get over it? And And I think to myself, isn't that funny? Because what I do quite often, I've done it 2 or 3 times in my life, grow my hair long enough to cut it off and donate it to children with cancer who lose their hair. But nobody cares about that. There's just somebody out there who's got their weirdness about long hair, and they do their thing. And so there's a part of me that thinks, God, it's not even worth being a good person because people still have their trips. That's not the voice of God. Keep being good. Even when people have other opinions of you, keep being good and do your best to hold the center. Not over here, but right here. And your best in God. Not just your own opinions, but your best in God. Please take a few centering breaths. All the stuff of the world, all the thoughts, numerous conflicts that the world seems to present. Let's set it all aside. When you inhale, hear the words, I am. On the exhale, hear the words, at peace. Over and over, I am at peace. Now don't just hear it, don't just say it. Actually feel it and imagine it. I am at peace on the exhale. Really feel it. Your best to actually feel that you are, in fact, at peace. And let come to mind any decision you've had to make in the last hours, days, weeks, months. Any decision you had to make. Between this and that, doing this or not doing that. It's not like you have to intensify them, but if they are big, notice it. But they're still decisions, they're conflicts. It can be, when I sit in this position, it's painful, so I need to find another position. That's still other things to decide. Simple or not. And recognize and own that it's a form of conflict because you're not centered, quiet, at peace. Just own that. It's a form of conflict. Should I take today off work? Well, the boss might get upset. That's conflict. Notice all the varying forms of conflict that happen every day. I'd like to sleep in, but I probably shouldn't. It's a conflict. And they might seem small, but they all add up and become inflammations in our body, which become illnesses, burdens in our mind. Now go back to I am at peace, meaning unwavering. Imagine and feel unwaveringly you are centered in God, like nothing actually matters. I'm centered in God, nothing matters. Really get that. If you're centered in God, you are feeling peace, tranquility, calm, oneness. And it's unwavering. Nothing can move you. Then, what decisions might you make when you go back to thinking about the challenges or conflict decisions? Don't think between this and that. Just what is the one that most resonates with the peace you're feeling? Which decision most resonates with peace? And then practice letting that be your decision. Not, yeah, but. If I'm centered in peace, which decision most resonates with that peace? Because peace is God. So if I'm centered in peace, I'm centered in God. And if I decide a decision that most resonates with peace, it's the one that most resonates with God, which means it's probably the one I need to choose. Now see yourself doing it. Just imagine with a greater ease divide and conquer. You just cut away things that are irrelevant. That beautiful sword of light of Archangel Michael cutting away all other things and allowing just the one right decision. Don't analyze it, and definitely don't allow the voice of doubt to get in, but look at this. And then breathe in the accomplishment of this decision. I did it. This is the right decision. Breathe in another one. This is right. Yes. And allow it to feel like it's building your center. It's building your confidence. I am is building your decisions. They feed you. So imagine it's a nutritious supplement when you make right decisions. You don't have to fight with people that love enabling and making no decisions, or they lie to themselves and pretend that they can't choose between this or that because they think it's all got relevance. There is one right decision beyond no decision and beyond the old decisions. One right decision, singular. And I am determined to know that guidance and that voice. Just a moment longer. Every decision, it's yes, and fill up with it. Draw it into yourself. Yes, got it. That is right for me. This is right for me. And if you're conflicted, step back until you're clear. And then quietly acknowledge and give thanks for the righteous decisions you've made. These are not good decisions versus bad decisions. These are not good decisions. They are God decisions. I'm learning to live in the light of God. No duality. And so it is.